2004's Salem's Lot brings Rob Lowe to a town that already has plenty of dark seduction without him, as people are being tempted by blood, immortality, sex, power, freedom, meaning the vampires have essentially taken over many of Rob Lowe's traditional responsibilities, while Rob Lowe himself isn't really treated as the heartthrob at all. He's an outcast. The only conventional sex bomb here is Eva, who, with several decades in Rob Lowe, is the one doing the seducing and hooking up. And if that isn't enough seduction, a dead gravedigger makes an extremely direct pass at Andre Braugher, and Donald Sutherland speaks French. We first meet Rob Lowe attacking an old Catholic priest, which these days could be for any number of justified reasons. Ben is a writer, returning to the town where he grew up, ostensibly to write a book, but really because there's something here he never managed to leave behind. As a child, he entered the Marston house and experienced something so horrifying that 30 years later he's like, yeah, what was that all about? I've got a few weeks off, let's find out. At one point, Ben says complex characters can elevate genre, which could just be screenwriter Peter Filardi leaving himself a note, but it could also be a good description of what Salem's Lot is trying to do here, because the vampires are important, but so is giving us enough of the town and its people to make us interested in what those vampires are actually destroying. This made me curious about how much of this film actually comes from Stephen King's book. And the answer is that I don't know. I didn't read the book. Rob Lowe is not in the book. Fortunately, people who have read it say that this version is surprisingly interested in many of the things King was interested in, particularly the town itself and the darkness everybody living there has quietly agreed not to talk about. I assume an ancient vampire's usual process requires some effort. You know, move into a town, identify the vulnerable people, discover their resentments, tempt them with whatever they want most, slowly corrupt the community from within, and eventually build yourself a loyal army of the undead. Barlow gets to Salem's Lot and finds its richest man sexually abusing his daughter and using a corrupt property deal to provide Barlow with the invitation he needs, a doctor being blackmailed over an affair with the mother of one of his patients, so Barlow can really just go back to the Marston house and chill. These people are already trying to drink each other's blood, they just don't have fangs yet. And once Barlow provides those, he barely needs to explain how they work because everybody already knows exactly who they'd like to take a bite out of. Floyd already resents Ben for moving in on Susan, so Floyd would love to be able to squeeze himself into a vent and go after Ben. When he starts vampiring up, he gets to do just that. Charlie Rhodes has spent years upsetting a busload of children who obviously all get hungry at roughly the same time, so when those same children become vampires, they obviously eat Charlie. Larry Crockett's upset because Vampire Dud flew off with his daughter Ruth and apparently they laughed at him on the way. It's news to us that vampires can hurt feelings. Barlow has given their existing grievances a little bloodlust. At one point, Ruth asks, what's the truth about this town? And I think that might be the most important question in the film because Ben hasn't actually returned to Salem's Lot looking for vampires. He's returned looking for an answer to precisely that question. The closer he looks, the more the town starts revealing itself. Salem's Lot has developed an entire social structure around keeping the darkness safely in the dark. Like vampires, who also need to stay in the dark. But Ben has arrived to do precisely the thing that threatens this arrangement, because as a writer, he wants to extract that darkness from the town, and he's accidentally developed a vampire control strategy because eventually the writer and the vampire hunter are doing essentially the same job, finding the thing that lives in the darkness and dragging it into the light. Like vampires, who famously do not want to be dragged into the light. That makes a writer surprisingly useful in a town where survival has depended for years upon everybody agreeing not to look too closely, but silently looking closely at things is what my man Rob Lowe does. And this is where something strange starts happening because none of the qualities we've spent this investigation associating with Rob Lowe have disappeared, but now all of those qualities combine for our first research finding. Rob Lowe is the leader you want when you're running out of other people. Mark knows how to move through Salem's Lot. Matt Burke has done vampire research. Dr. Cody understands the bodies, some more than others, and Father Callahan understands the faith involved. Ben isn't the expert or even the architect of the response. He's the field leader who recognizes they should probably just take the same car. As the town's institutions become increasingly useless and everybody else is either dying, disappearing, or switching sides, Ben assembles whoever remains into something resembling an emergency response team. Matt Burke is important to this because Andre Braugher gives Rob Lowe somebody whose intelligence and authority he doesn't need to overwhelm overwhelmed. Ben can listen to him and trust him, and he needs him, and there is something surprisingly satisfying about watching Rob Lowe share the investigative weight with somebody who possesses an entirely different kind of gravitas, while you can consistently see in Matt's eyes that he knows they're all screwed. But there's another reason this Rob Lowe feels different here, which is that Ben is genuinely frightened, and the Marston house represents something much more significant to him than another obstacle which he believes he can overcome. It represents the one moment in his life when he believes somebody needed him and he failed them because as a frightened child, he heard what he thought was someone crying and ran away. 30 years later, the entire town begins collapsing around him again, but this time, he doesn't run. Barlow initially tries to stop Ben with an offer of fame, money, and women, which is an unusually poorly researched pitch to Rob Lowe. If any of those were going to compromise him, he probably would have found out several films ago. Ben kills Barlow before undead Susan is much more precise in her offer. See, before Susan became part of the undead, she apparently hit the library. Her research lets her tell Ben that the boy in the Marston house was already dead when Ben heard him crying, meaning there was never anything he could have done to save him. Then she offers him love, happiness, and permission to finally forgive himself. She doesn't offer him eternal youth, presumably, because even a vampire can see Rob Lowe is already bringing that to the relationship. But Susan is offering Ben the one thing he actually came to Salem's Lot to find: release him from the guilt he's carried since childhood. But when Mark calls out and Susan turns to kill him, Ben has to kill Susan to save Mark. This is perhaps the clearest evidence of what has changed. The vampires have found the thing Ben genuinely wants, and it still isn't enough to stop him from doing what needs to be done. A child needs his help, and this time Ben's not running. Ben and Mark burn the Marston house to the ground, which he originally wanted to rent, and although this seems like an extreme retaliation for his booking being messed up, it does complete what Ben returned to Salem's Lot to do: understand the house, understand the town, and finally confront what happened to him as a child. No, Ben doesn't save everybody. Actually, arguably, everybody's dead and the whole town has burned to the ground now. There's nothing left. The guy just wanted an Airbnb for a few weeks so he could write a book. Back in Detroit, Mark kills Callahan, who's been corrupted by Barlow's blood and become his mortal servant, tells Ben they won, and says he can finally rest. The child has become capable of finishing the job, which brings us to perhaps our most important research finding yet. Rob Lowe, like all of us, has learned from his past experiences and becomes the first responder you want. His instincts become leadership, curiosity becomes vigilance, charm becomes trust, and adaptability becomes survival, while the mysterious conviction that Rob Lowe probably knows what he's doing becomes extremely reassuring when you or someone you know is quickly turning into a vampire. While the whole town feeds on that guy who was abusing his daughter, we've been able to feed off Rob Lowe for quite a few films. There are many more Rob Lowe films remaining, and the investigation may continue, but for now, I think we can finally let Rob Lowe rest.